So in a new clip that Ben Shapiro's uploaded, he is comprehensively explaining why Tucker Carlson and the whole Groyper thing, such a sinister, heinous force within the conservative movement, supposedly, although he explains, well, actually, they aren't conservative at all. They're hijacking the movement. And but in particular talks about Tucker Carlson and why the words he has said are so sinister. And I want to show you what Ben has to say. But before I do that, I had to share with you this. So I saw a clip of Tucker Carlson talking to Dave Smith, and he was basically trying to justify or maybe give a partial explanation or apology for why he said that he hates Christian Zionists more than anyone else. Presumably, he's been saying this because Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, was defending his association with Tucker Carlson, saying there's a venomous coalition going up against him. And then people were pushing back and saying, hold on one second, who is the venomous coalition? Tucker's the one that said he hates Christian Zionists more than anyone else. He's the one that's been sowing division. He's the one that's been putting venom. And it's not cancellation to push back and say, hey, we don't like those ideas and we think that should not, you as someone that's meant to be a leading light or leading figure on the right, we want to make clear that we think those views are abhorrent. And so Tucker has clearly felt that he's slightly pushed into a bit of a corner, or maybe he's had a chat with Kevin Roberts, I have no idea. But he wanted to explain himself. Let's have a watch.
But I just want to say at the outset, because this has been weighing on me, I did say something that I really regret saying that I didn't fully mean. I said it because I was mad, which is always when I say things I don't really mean. When I get pissed, my wife's always telling me this. I was snippy and I didn't explain it. And I said something to the effect of, I despise Christian Zionists. And I'm just sorry that I said that, because I don't. I'm mad at a certain kind of thinking. Some of the nicest people I know are Christian Zionists, actually. If you're in a car crash, they would save you. If you needed someone to watch your bank account, they wouldn't steal from you. They're like really good people and sweet people. I want to be very specific quickly about what I was talking about. In at least a couple of different occasions, the Israeli government bombed churches in Gaza and killed a bunch of Christians. And not an accident, of course. I mean, this is like a very high-tech military with precision. I mean, they, gave pagers with bombs in them to Hezbollah. So like this is a military, a national defense institution that understands what it's doing. They didn't accidentally bomb 2 churches and kill these Christians, and they never apologized for it. And so I brought this up with a couple of Christian leaders, including the Speaker of the House.
So let's just understand what's happened here. First of all, by the way, Netanyahu did actually put out a statement when there was an accidental misfiring, and he said, we do apologize and deeply regret it. And I'll explain to you exactly what happened in a second. But let's just be clear that what he's doing here is he's saying, sorry, the reason why I was getting so upset with Christian Zionists is because the Jews are intentionally targeting Christians. That's his accusation. He's actually embedding himself even deeper. Oh, sorry, you don't have to see my water there. Embedding himself even deeper in anti-Semitism in his justification. Now, again, before we get to the Ben Shapiro clip, let me just say to you, first of all, when people hear, Israel bombed a church, this sounds horrific. It is horrific. We need to separate what happens from what it means. Yes, there has been a couple of churches that were hit in Gaza, tragically, and some civilians even died. There is, however, no credible evidence that Israel intentionally targeted those churches. It's just unbelievable. You've got all these thousands and thousands of Christians being intentionally targeted by Islamists in Nigeria and other parts of Africa and the world. Doesn't want to talk about that. Let's understand. The IDF said that, for example, a strike at the Holy Family Catholic Church was caused by a misfired shell during nearby fighting, not deliberate targeting. Israel investigated and expressed regret. Tucker says they never apologized. The Prime Minister apologized publicly. Gaza also is one of the most complex battlefields on earth. Hamas embeds itself in civilian areas, including schools, hospitals, and sometimes near religious sites. And when terrorists hide among civilians, even precision strikes can go tragically wrong. Every modern military has made tragic mistakes. In the US, 2015, America accidentally bombed a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Afghanistan. 42 were killed. 1999, NATO accidentally bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. 2017, US strikes in Mosul killed families hiding from ISIS. These were not deliberate, they were tragic errors, just like Israel's. And by the way, forget actual church buildings for a second, the IDF has accidentally killed its own soldiers. And no one claims Israel's intentionally targeting its own troops, and Jews and Israelis and supporters of Israel don't get upset with the IDF over that. Friendly fire happens in every war. Why assume malice every time civilians are tragically caught in the crossfire? Israel does not target churches. Inside Israel, Christian sites are protected and flourish. These incidents were tragedies, not strategies. And even synagogues, ancient synagogues, have been hit in, Israel's wars historically. And under international laws, yes, churches have protected civilian sites. Unless, however, they're used for military purposes. So you should know, by the way, that if Hamas did hide fighters or weapons in a church, they've committed a war crime and the church does lose protection. So yes, mourn the victims, demand accountability, but recognize the context and intent. So what Tucker did there is absolutely ridiculous, heinous, disgraceful. Anyway, I now want to share with you this really important clip of Ben Shapiro unpacking all of this and Tucker Carlson even more. Have a watch.
For those who don't understand what's going on, let's begin with Nick Fuentes. Now, from Tucker Carlson's interview, you might have gathered that Fuentes has some borderline views on race, a peculiar obsession with what he calls organized Jewry, and a rather sad relationship with the female sex. But probably you came away thinking that, for the most part, Fuentes lives on the radical edge of normality. You think that if you watch the interview, because Tucker Carlson decided that it was important not only to host Fuentes, but to smooth over his views, water them down, and make them far more palatable to a normal audience. As we'll discuss in a bit, this is what Tucker Carlson does for a living. But back to Nick Fuentes. To understand just what Tucker did here, we must actually examine what Nick Fuentes says on his show, and has said for almost a decade, because he was asked precisely 0 questions about any of what you're about to see by Tucker Carlson. Nick Fuentes says women want to be raped.
A lot of women want to be raped. And when I say raped, I mean like, that sounds bad when I say it like that. But there's like a lot of women that really want a guy to beat the shit out of them. But also they have to pretend, but part of it is they have to pretend like they don't.
Nick Fuentes says that his followers should kill, rape, and die in his name.
Raise your right hand. All right, everybody raise your right hand. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I will kill, rape, and die for Nicholas J. Fuentes.
Nick Fuentes says that white people are justified in being racist.
The reason that we talk about this, by the way, I know a lot of black people see this and they go, man, why are you always talking about black people, this and that? Because there just needs to be some shame here. Well, there's a few reasons. First, white people are every single bit justified in being racist. Every single bit justified, to the extent that that means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them.
Nick Fuentes is a Hitler admirer and a Holocaust denier.
Buddy, it's Führer Friday. It is Hitler Friday. Shut up. It is Heil Hitler Friday. Hitler was a pedophile and kind of a pagan. It's like, well, he was also really cool. So
that doesn't really sound correct to me. Wait a second. It takes 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies, and you have 15 ovens, probably in 4 different kitchens, right? Doing 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years. How long would it take you to make 6 million? I don't know. It certainly wouldn't be 5 years, right? The math doesn't seem to add up there. The math doesn't quite seem to add up there. I don't think you'd result in 6 million. Maybe 200 to 300,000 cookies. And I think the Red Cookie Association said something like that, probably 200 to 300,000 cookies baked, probably. And in addition, in this hypothetical, I imagine that if you took aerial photographs over the kitchens, you would need to see certain smokestacks to release the smoke from baking the cookies, and the smokestacks would project certain shadows, but I guess they're not visible in the aerial photographs taken over the kitchens. Moreover, if you look at the soil texture, it's really not deep enough for mass cookie storage underground.
Nick Fuentes believes that the Jews start all the wars, that perfidious Jews in positions of power ought to be killed, and says the Jews are filth who have to be removed from the country.
And once again, remember who is responsible for it all: the Jews. They are responsible for every war in the world. It's not even debatable at this point. This has nothing to do with oil. This has nothing to do with democracy. This has nothing to do with liberal internationalism. We are at war with Iran because they pose a threat to Israel's hegemony. That's why we're bombing their nukes to pave the way for regime change so Israel can dominate the region, because that makes them the most powerful they can be. There is an occult element at the high levels of society, and specifically among the Jews. So many of the people that are perpetrating the lies and the destruction on the country, they are evildoers. They are people that worship false gods. They are people that practice magic or rituals or whatever. And more than anything, those people need to be, when we take power, they need to be given the death penalty. Straight up. And I'm far more concerned about that than I am about even non-white people or mass migration. These people that are communing with demons and engaging in this sort of witchcraft and stuff, and these people that are suppressing the name Christ and suppressing Christianity, they must be absolutely annihilated when we take power. This is God's country. This is Jesus's country. This is not the domain of atheists or devil worshippers or perfidious Jews. This is Christ's country.
So, that right there is just a brief glimpse into the twisted mind of Nick Fuentes. And there's plenty more where that came from. Of course, hours of it per day, in fact. And there's no doubt that Nick Fuentes has a lot of play these days. That's because the left, by moving into a politics of anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-male identitarianism, created its bizarro mirror image, a white pseudo-Christian incel identitarian movement dedicated to destroying the institutions of this country and replacing Americanism with something else. Nick Fuentes' philosophy is not fully formed. It's an incoherent stew of malignity. But that's where Tucker Carlson enters the story. Now, since his exit from Fox News in 2023, when, of course, he was a very, very popular host, Tucker Carlson has turned himself into a conspiracist and a crank and a pathological liar. Tucker excuses Vladimir Putin's murderous and barbarous reign. He has even become one of his most ardent defenders.
It is so much nicer than any city in my country. I had no idea. My father spent a lot of time there in the 80s when he worked for the US government and barely had electricity. And now it is so much cleaner and safer and prettier aesthetically. It's architecture, it's food, it's service than any country, city in the United States that you have to, and this is non-ideological. How did that happen? How did that happen? And at a certain point, I don't think the average person cares as much about abstractions as about the concrete reality of his life. And if you can't use your subway, for example, as many people are afraid to in New York City because it's too dangerous, you have to sort of wonder, like, isn't that the ultimate measure of leadership? And that's true, by the way, it's radicalizing for an American to go to Moscow, I didn't know that, I've learned it this week, to Singapore, to Tokyo, to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Because these cities, no matter how we're told they're run and on what principles they're run, are wonderful places to live.
So I guess you put in 10 rubles here and you get it back when you put the cart back. So it's free, but there's an incentive to return it and not just bring it to your homeless encampment. I went from amused to legitimately angry. So we were guessing what this would cost. Everybody here from the United States buys groceries, and we didn't pay any attention to costs as we were just putting in the cart what we would actually eat over a week. And we all came in around $400, about $400. It was $104 US here. And that's when you start to realize that ideology maybe doesn't matter as much as you thought, corruption. If you take people's standard of living and you tank it through filth and crime and inflation, and they literally can't buy the groceries they want, at that point, maybe it matters less what you say or whether you're a good person or a bad person. You're wrecking people's lives in their country, and that's what our leaders have done to us.
When Tucker Carlson interviewed Vladimir Putin, by the way, Vladimir Putin was so amused by Tucker Carlson's easy questioning that he actually mocked him. Tucker Carlson has massaged the Iranian dictatorship and admitted to not asking any difficult questions of the president of that dictatorship.
The interview is limited by a couple of factors. One, it was done by remote through a translator. That's always awkward. For another, I don't speak Persian. And there are all kinds of questions that I didn't ask the president of Iran, particularly questions to which I knew I could not get an honest answer, such as, was your nuclear program totally disabled by the bombing campaign by the U.S. government a week and a half ago? There's no chance he's going to answer that question honestly. I didn't bother to ask it. The answer, in fact, from an American perspective, even from the CIA's perspective, is unknowable.
Tucker bizarrely worships at the altar of Qatar.
They're mad at you because you don't put your parents in some institution. Maybe they're trying to break up your families.
Well, it can be a reason. Honestly, I don't know what what is really the purpose behind this, but we see that, a lot of things that are happening are attacks on humanity in general. It's when you lose the family value, when you lose the connection between the family themselves, you will lose the connection between the people as well, on a broader level, on the people in the same neighborhood, on the people in the same region, in the same countries. And that's basically will just make us, as individuals who are, quote unquote, independent from anyone, that's what we will feel. Yet it will just make our societies vulnerable and easy to be penetrated.
That's right.
Tucker Carlson praises Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, even as Maduro keeps the entire country in communist penury and ships fentanyl into the United States to kill Americans by the hundreds of thousands.
Why are we so opposed to Nicolas Maduro? So if you ask someone on the street, random person, why are we against Nicolas Maduro? The answer you're going to get is, who's Nicolas Maduro? But if you find someone in South Florida, for example, who knows who Nicolas Maduro is, who can identify where Venezuela is on a map, that person will almost certainly say, well, because he's a communist or a socialist, he's exceedingly left-wing. And that is true. Nicolas Maduro and his government are very left-wing on economics. Not on social policy, by the way, which is kind of interesting. In Venezuela, gay marriage is banned, abortion is banned, sex changes for transgenderism are banned. It's one of the very few countries in the entire hemisphere with those policies. It is on social policy, not defending the regime, just saying, one of the most conservative countries in North or South or Central America. Only El Salvador really comes close.
Tucker Carlson glosses Hamas, the genocidal jihadi group behind October 7th, as a political organization.
You can't claim that they're in Hamas while simultaneously claiming that Hamas is a group of jihadis. They're Islamic extremists, which they also claim constantly, which I don't know if that's true, by the way. It seems more like a political organization, but whatever it is, they're telling us constantly they're Al-Qaeda.
Tucker Carlson has attacked President Trump as a cover-up artist for sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein on behalf of Israel and Mossad, making sure, of course, never to mention President Trump's name, because, of course, Tucker's a coward.
And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that.
A quick message. We all hear about the Palestinian displacement, or Nakba, of 1948. But there was another, even greater displacement that we haven't been told about. Nearly 1 million Jews were expelled from Arab lands at the exact same time. Watch the trailer for our new and absolutely essential documentary called The Real Nakba. And if you want to watch the full film, just click the link below in the video description. We've all been told about the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe of 1948. Around 700,000 Arabs were displaced. But here's what you're rarely told. That displacement didn't come from some Jewish plan for genocide. It wasn't Israel's goal. It wasn't Israel's desire. It happened because Arab leaders launched a war of annihilation. They tried to wipe out the newborn Jewish state, vowing to drive the Jews into the sea. And in the chaos of that war, people fled. Many because their leaders told them to, promising they'd return after victory. But the term Nakba was originally used to describe the fact that the Arabs lost the war, not the displacement. Now the term describes the displacement of war used as a political weapon against Israel. But there was another Nakba you haven't been told about. A catastrophe rooted not in the fog of war, but in the clear, deliberate desire for persecution and genocide. It happened at the very same time, and it led to even more displacement. Yet most of the world has never heard of it. Over 850,000 Jews, more than the number of displaced Arabs, were driven from their homes across the Arab world. Communities that had thrived for millennia were uprooted overnight. Families stripped of citizenship, of property, of dignity, assaulted, expelled, forced to flee with nothing but their faith. Why? Because they were Jews. because Israel dared to exist, because the Arab League openly orchestrated it, drafting plans in 1947 to freeze Jewish bank accounts, seize property, and intern Jews as enemy nationals. This is the real Nakba, a catastrophe born of pure anti-Semitism. In this JTV documentary, we'll journey country by country, from Baghdad to Cairo, from Sana'a to Tripoli, uncovering buried truths and survivor voices. And no, this isn't a tale of victimhood, it's a saga of endurance, courage, and triumph. Because the Jewish people didn't just survive this Nakba, we rebuilt, we came home. In Israel, our phoenix soared from the ashes. So buckle up and let's dive in. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.
Tucker Carlson also said in his interview with Nick Fuentes that the people he hates most in the entire world, more than ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Trans-Tifa, Marxists, rapists, murderers, are Christian Zionists who represent an enormous chunk of the conservative base. According to Tucker Carlson, who admits that he first read the Bible all the way through just 2 years ago, Christians who support a Jewish state of Israel are heretics and blasphemers with a brain virus.
How do you explain Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz, and there are a lot like that, John Bolton. I mean, I've known them all, George W. Bush, like Karl Rove. I mean, all people I know personally who I've seen like be seized by this brain virus, and they're not Jewish. Most of them are self-described Christians, and then the Christian Zionists who are, well, Christian Zionists. Like, what is that?
Right.
And I can just say for myself, I dislike them more than anybody. Because like what? Because it's Christian heresy, and I'm offended by that as a Christian.
But most of all, Tucker Carlson acts as an ideological launderer for other people's evils. Tucker Carlson says many inflammatory things, always buying back just enough of it to appear as though he's not saying what he's clearly saying. He's a master of gaslighting. Tucker Carlson, for example, would never say out loud what Nick Fuentes does. He wouldn't say the things many of his guests say. And so instead, he acts as an ideological launderer. He takes other people's hideous ideas, he softens them, he treats them with love and care, and then he provides them with a massive signal boost. So, for example, he'll ask a series of wildly obsequious questions to Nick Fuentes. He'll even let Nick Fuentes' support for Joseph Stalin slide.
It's actually funny. It was December 18th. I remember because that's an important date to me. And it's Joseph Stalin's birthday.
Oh.
I'm a fan.
You're a fan of Stalin's?
Mm-hmm. Always an admirer. But we don't need to go into that, I guess.
Well, that's, okay, let's get back. We'll circle back to that.
Tucker Carlson will have on a Hitler-friendly pseudo-historian to minimize the Holocaust and blame Winston Churchill for World War II. And he will call him America's best and most honest historian.
I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there.
See, this is how Tucker Carlson's ideological laundering works. You bring your dirty, ugly ideologies to Tucker Carlson's rhetorical car wash. He mixes it with some of the vestigial respect Americans have for him from his Fox News days, and voila, hideous ideas suddenly become mainstream. And then, of course, Tucker denies he said anything controversial at all. He was just asking questions. He was just interviewing people. You don't want him to cancel people, do you? Of course, there is no First Amendment right to a Tucker Carlson sensual massage. But to listen to Tucker, you'd think there was, so long as you despise America, oppose President Trump's foreign policy, and bear a peculiar dislike of Jews. Tucker Carlson, you see, is a coward. And here is where his relationship with Nick Fuentes begins, with Nick Fuentes correctly pointing out that Tucker Carlson is a coward. You see, Tucker Carlson, a few weeks back, had on Candace Owens to treat her to his usual ideological laundering services. That's after years of Candace Owens saying things like this.
And it is the case that dinosaur bones, for whatever reason, are always just found by the paleontologist. Like, it's not like you and me walking outside. I'm like, hey, a dinosaur bone. And, or by somebody who's related to a paleontologist. It's very strange. And then, but it was just convenient for Israel that JFK got shot. It was just convenient, you guys. Totally convenient. It was convenient for Israel, by the way, when the towers went down.
I just want to be clear. Anything happens to me, blame the Zionists. Like 1000% blame the Zionists. Like let that be my parting word.
I'm waking people up to the fact that pedophiles are in power.
Yes.
They are literally in power. And that is intentional because then they can be controlled while they are in power. And they are also exhibiting signs of a psychopathology that lets them know that they will do harm to the masses and feel nothing because they were themselves, many of them, raped when they were children.
Yep.
It is not a coincidence that Justin Trudeau is gay. Obama, gay. Zelensky, gay. Emmanuel Macron, gay and married to a trans man who molested him when he was a child.
Well, Candace Owens had recently hosted Nick Fuentes, and this led Tucker Carlson, in an attempt to dissociate from Fuentes, to label him a weird little gay kid operating from a basement, and a Fed as well.
That's obvious to me. I've been around a long time. I know it when I see it.
Yeah, and I will say I don't understand it. We were very kind to him. Like, I truly, like, we almost said, like, we felt maybe he was a bit lonely. We should invite him back for dinner. I mean, that's how good of an experience I had.
Clearly it's
and then
sad.
it was a 180. So it's either A, it's being driven from like a little boy insecurity, and he just was so worried that he like just went on the attack because he doesn't know how to have normal relations after being banned everywhere.
Well, I think there's
that could be one element.
The angry gay kid thing going on. Yeah.
Well, Nick Fuentes did not take kindly to this. After all, here was Tucker Carlson, a man Nick Fuentes correctly sees as a fellow traveler, dismissing him, all the while refusing to say the sorts of things for which Fuentes takes slings and arrows. And so Fuentes unleashed on him as a fraud and also as an expert on gaslighting.
Tucker is like the goat of gaslighting. But unironically, he goes up at the memorial and said, Charlie Kirk told the truth. You know who else told the truth? Jesus. And you know what happened? He got killed by Jews. And people said, so are you saying that the Jews killed Charlie Kirk in the way that they killed Jesus for telling the truth because they hate the truth? And Tucker said, I never said that. You're crazy. I never said that. Everyone eats hummus. What do you mean everyone runs Jerusalem? But I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Tucker Carlson says, I have so many trust funds, I never have to work. Tucker went to a $45,000 per year private high school, then a $45,000 per year selective Ivy League school in New England. Tucker Carlson's daddy was a Reagan appointee. And then, after years of bragging about being an elite, bragging about being so out of touch and so rich, now he's going to be the spokesperson for all the white people. Now he's going to roll up his sleeves. I just like to hunt and fish in my log cabin. I care about Klarna and credit card debt. But then when it comes to me, I'm one of the real disaffected white people. You want to talk about me and them? I am them.
Well, there was one big problem for Tucker Carlson in all of this. Nick Fuentes is absolutely 100% correct. Tucker is a coward, and Tucker's audience, much of which he shares with Nick Fuentes, knows it. And so Tucker hit upon a final stratagem. He let Nick Fuentes cuck him. He brought Nick Fuentes on to legitimate his ideology. He signal boosted Fuentes, glossed him, shined him, presented him to the world, all in order to protect his own reputation with his online base, a base he is competing over with Nick Fuentes. Now, of course, Tucker has a right to do all of this for the 100th time. He can do what he likes. This is America. But there's no question that Tucker has become the most virulent super spreader of vile ideas in America. And the rest of us who oppose those vile ideas have every right to call him that. Well, now Tucker Carlson has seen fit to launder Nick Fuentes, the person who hated Charlie most and who wished him destruction. That's not an act of friendship. It's an act of sick evil. And then, of course, there's Tucker Carlson's relationship with the vice president. Certainly, Vice President Vance has been quite generous with Tucker Carlson. That loyalty was not reciprocated last week, to say the least. Here, for example, is what Nick Fuentes has said about J.D. Vance's wife, Usha.
Andrew Tate and Bronze Age pervert and all these people, for years, all they talk about is going to the gym, being a vitalist, fighting the Matrix, India smells bad, all this kind of shit. And now they're all in favor of a fat race mixer who's married to a Jeet who named his son Vivek, who was mentored by a Jewish neocon and a gay Fed, Peter Thiel. This guy has a non-white wife and a kid named Vivek. This guy is going to be a defender of white identity? I don't think so. This guy's going to defend American identity?
You slammed JD Vance for having an Indian wife, yet Trump's wife is an immigrant who was working here legally for a time. His son is half foreign, bilingual, and holds dual citizenship, yet you give him a pass. You're either a hypocrite or just retarded.
She's white. Dude, she's white. If we had millions of Slovenian supermodels immigrating to America, I don't think we'd have a big problem with it.
Tucker Carlson had on Nick Fuentes and did not ask him a single question about any of this. He just brought him on to launder his ugly ideas and make him more popular. That doesn't seem quite like the act of a friend.
Before you go, you have to check out the trailer for our new documentary on Moshiach, the Jewish belief about the Messiah, what he will do, how the world will look after his coming, and why his arrival is close. And if you want to watch the full thing, just click the link below in the video description. For thousands of years, the Jewish people have carried a promise that history is not a random cycle, that suffering and darkness and exile are not the end of the story, that one day the world will be redeemed and the Messiah, the Moshiach in Hebrew, will come. But what does that actually mean? Who is Moshiach? When will he come? How will we know he's real? Why would God design a world that waits so long for redemption in the first place? And what will life feel like after he comes? With AI and machines beginning to replace work, maybe we're already catching a glimpse. But then what will we do with our days? The prophets spoke of that world long ago. In this groundbreaking JTV Plus documentary, we uncover the truth about the Jewish vision of the Messiah, who he is, why it matters, and why his coming could be closer than you think. Join us as we reveal the truth about history's most anticipated figure. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.